Okay, good evening, everybody.
Good evening, sir.
Everybody's coming in and getting settled in. All right, how are y'all doing tonight?
Outstanding. Happy New Year.
Yeah, happy New
Happy
Year,
New
guys.
Year. So welcome everyone to Coach's Corner. I am filling in for the lovely and talented host Vesper, who's taking the night off, and so you're going to have to deal with my technical limitations and less than pleasant visage. But we're happy to have everybody joining us again for the Coach's Corner. Got a really interesting episode tonight. When we did our first episode at the end of April of last year, which is coming up on, 9 months now. First episode we did, we had myself and Tristan, Brannos, and Duke Eliyahu, who we all kind of went over a very brief synopsis of our general training philosophies. Mine involving training methodology, Eliyahu talking about training from a academic perspective as a college professor, Tristan talking about his experience as from a martial arts dojo, teaching it from that perspective. And so eventually we had to cajole Brannos into saying some things about what we'd originally talked about. And so it's taken a while to get around to him, but so tonight we're going to have Brannos talk about his training methodology and philosophy, basically, kind of expanding on what we had talked about in our first episode. And we are joined tonight by Viscount Tristan, Sir Sagan, who's one of our add-on coaches throughout the year, as well as Sir Octamasades. So a couple of the coaches we've added throughout the year and have definitely made this project a lot more fun for us. Brannos, why don't you tell us a little bit about your training philosophy?
Sure. So, this is one of those scenarios where it only took me 9 months to figure out what it was, I guess. But my training philosophy comes a little bit different, I think, than the formal method. Something I started a number of years ago was teaching that having discussions about coaching. The one piece around that was how to take every individual student and learn how to motivate them to be as great as they can. A coach can find those times and those pieces that they need at that given time. They could be down in the dumps because they just lost a tournament that they shouldn't have lost. There has to be a way to get them back out of that. In a real boxing fight, you see that guy come after a third round after he's obviously behind and needs to make a shift. And that coach is there to build him back up and then give him ideas of how to make that change happen so he can go forward. Those are just the little pieces of the things you have to do to motivate your students. There's on the SCA Coach's Corner, there's some posts about the one thing we do know is it's discipline. Discipline gets you there, and drive. And that is the foundation. And we can say it, but it's not always the easiest thing to have. And having somebody else there to take those days when you weave out of that lane of discipline and pull you back in, that's a coach's job, right? The days when you don't feel like being there, it's a coach's job to maybe, smack you and say, either get your head in the game or go home. That's the way, we see the coach taps into that person and reads that person. And the trainer, he can also do coaching things, but primarily we have lots of trainers for boxers. We have a conditioning trainer, and we have food trainer, and we have nutrition trainers, and we have boxing trainers, and he has a ton of trainers, but the coach is the guy that manages those. He manages those trainers when he's like, hey, you need to push him more on his body work. And when he hits the nutrition guy, he's like, hey, you need to start getting this guy down in weight before we hit our first, our boxing match, and that coach is there to drive that. But not only is he there to drive there, but he has to make that boxer his guy believe when he steps into that ring that there is nothing but winning. And when that's ripped from you, it is very difficult to handle that by yourself. And that coach is there to say, no, hey, let those go. We're winning from here on out. And here's how you're going to do it, because I know you so well. We're going to drop into these things. Here's the openings I know you can hit because we worked on it. And those are the things that a coach can provide. And it's not easy to find great coaches. Not everybody can find a great coach for them. And not every coach has to be. There's a lot of boxing coaches out there that are fathers to their sons because they know them, not because they know boxing, but because they know their son. Right? And they're through them all the way through their career. They learn how to box. They learn how to get the trainers involved, but they know their son so well and when they can push him and when they have to lift him up. And that's what a coach does. And that's a coach can help develop people to make them great and keep them on that line and keep them disciplined so that they're still going forward. And the other piece is, the one thing, and you can get a little bit of from here. And if you're on a North Shield fight school seminar I did, you can see all the time. And that is, you can excite your guy about learning and about continuing on that path. I am, for me, every time I get into these meetings, I am excited because I get to talk to these guys. I get to talk about fighting, and I absolutely love it. And I moat that to the other people around me until they're excited. And then we're all out there doing it, and we're pushing each other. And that's how you end up in that space of becoming great, right? And, is it a method? It's hard to call that a method. Is it some type of teaching thing we're doing? I go through footwork. I develop lots of stuff for people and lots of new things. Would I say I'm the greatest trainer in the world? Probably not. I think there's a lot better trainers than me that could define every piece of the things they do to somebody. But to tap somebody's emotional and mental state is a whole different piece inside of that fighter's mentality. Some people can do it pretty well for themselves. For most part, that's what I did. I had people around me to help me because I just, I bring that excitement, and then everybody comes around me. I get more excited, and they keep me in line, right? And there's days I'm like sitting on my heels, and somebody comes hits me. I'm like, oh, thank you for waking me up. Now I got to hit you back. Damn it, And so, some people can manage that path. But even I didn't manage that path alone. I managed that path with all my friends at fight practice and the people that come and go and the people that come in from other areas that just made things even like, oh, hell yeah, we got Quill coming in from Toronto this week again, And, it's those things that really push you keeping going forward. And that's what a friend can do. It doesn't even, person doesn't even need to be a fighter necessarily. They can watch, they understand what's happening out there. They understand what's happening in your head. They could be sitting at your home going, I know you want to sit here, but I want to go to fight practice. They don't even need to fight. As soon as they say, I want to go to fight practice, guess who else is going to fight practice? Probably you. Right? And that's the key to building a great fighter is that's the key to keeping that discipline, is to have somebody wake you up all the time and make you remember what you really want to get to, that end goal. So we got about, I did a little bit of looking up some stuff, and we got some coaching stuff out there from, and this is fundamental to everything from the Olympics to golf to anything you want to do. And we got the 5 keys, and essentially this is like, the 5 attributes and the 5 obstacles and the 5 keys to training and 5 mental muscles. And I think we got one more in there. Let's see, I posted it and I can't get my mouse to work. Here we go. And the 5 mental exercise and tools that you can use. So we're going to go through those tonight because I think those are really important. And I think the more you understand those, the more you understand yourself and the more you can understand others. Because being able a lot of these things we're going to go through, some people don't need, and some people do need. And you have to be able to recognize the times when they need them and build those and use those. So, all right. Well, let's, you guys ready? We want to start with the first one?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We're just listening. You roll on.
All right. So 5 attitudes: ownership, process, challenge, long-term, and risk. So, you know, I think when we look at those, you know, we're looking at those things to become good at what we do. All right, as good as we can, as great as we can go, and then past that, because people will help push you there. Ownership is fundamental, right, guys? I mean, if you take a look at these things, you have to own the responsibility of doing what you want to do.
Accountability is a good word that fits in there really well too.
What's that?
Accountability.
Yes. Accountability, 100%.
Don't never say, "Well, it's somebody else's fault. I can't do this," or, you know, "Oh, I'm not progressing very well. It's because of somebody else is not teaching me." It's never them. It's you.
Yep. I didn't go to practice because I had to sit at home and wait for this person to call. Right. So, you know, that ownership is important because that's what sets you moving along your path, and it keeps you moving along your path. It's when you get into a place where you blame others, it just becomes easier, because it's whenever it's not your fault and it's someone else's fault, it's easy to get out of anything you want because there's no accountability.
Well, it makes it easier on the blame side, but not the resolution side.
And there's the key, right? Because there won't be resolution.
No.
You know, there's one little trick that when, you know, in the back of my own head, whenever I'd have that creeping in thing and say, well, you know, the circumstances aren't conducive to me going to practice, my defense mechanism would be, is it absolutely positively impossible for me to make this work? Is there absolutely no way? And the answer always is, no, there is a way. If I want to try, yeah, there's a way to do it. And then it's just, are you smart enough to figure out that way to do it? And you don't want to admit you're dumb. So you say, all right, yeah, there's got to be a way I can do this. And it may not be obvious, but let me put my mind to it and figure out a way to make this work. Like, you kind of challenge yourself that way.
Well, you can either make excuses to fight, or you can make excuses to not fight.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think you just covered, actually. I mean, you're really jumped right into process, right? We have to set up what, you know, this is where I want to go. What's the process for me to get there? Right? Find what you think you need to reach those goals. It's like, hey, I want to drive to, you know, Ohio next week. If I don't have a car, I better set something up to make that process work. Right?
Figure it out. Yep.
Figure it out. You know, and sometimes that's hard because you have other, you know, I've been attending a practice in the local area twice a week for a very, very long time. And that means my wife's family used to do stuff every Sunday, or practically. And she's going to say that's a lie, but they, you know, somebody breaks a tooth, you know, when they're a kid, then we're going over and having cake. You know, if you know, somebody has a birthday, we're going over having cake. If somebody's, you know, gets an A on a report card, we're going over and have a cake. And
yeah, that's like, a lot of cakes.
I'm telling you, you know. And I looked at her.
You look
I'm
pretty
like,
good for a guy eating that much cake.
Well, that's because I looked at her and said, "Have fun." And I said, "I am happy to go to some of these." I set guidelines. She understood those. They understood those, and because I had a goal, and I had to set that process in place. And now they have stuff is like, "Hey, well, 5 o'clock. You know, we're having this at 5 o'clock because they know my practice ends at 5 o'clock and I can be over there." Right. And they, you know, they're willing to look at it and say, "Hey, this is what he's dedicated to. We want him here. So we're going to go ahead and do that as well." And there's, you know, so other times they're like, I don't think he wants to go to a baby shower. I think we're good, you know, and, you know, that's that process. You have to make those expectations. You have to set them. You have to work with somebody. And it doesn't mean that there's every once in a while, you know, I'm like, all right, stop at practice, can't stay, guys, and then go off, you know, but those are very rare.
Yeah, and we covered a bit of that in the last episode about the New Year's resolutions and setting your plan. You know,
Yeah.
set your plan and work your plan. That's how you do it.
Yep.
Well,
And
Brannos,
then you
one of the
jumped right
first things
into.
you said was ownership. Well,
Yeah.
if we expect ownership from the trainee, then we absolutely must give ownership from our side.
Mm-hmm. And Tristan, you jumped right in after you were talking, right into the challenge, right? Challenging yourself and pushing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's hard. I think. I don't know about the rest of you. I mean, there are times I struggle, right? That challenging yourself goes away, and you're
when
like,
you look at other people, they make it look easy.
Yeah.
Like when I look at you, Brannos, I'm like, this guy has he's got such a horsepower drive. He's like got a 12-cylinder engine under the hood that drives him. But you never see the part from the inside where that person is battling their own motivation, their own, all the stuff that goes on. Every one of us is human. And we all struggle with those same things.
Building a good routine, good habits, and then not breaking them. First time you break one of those routines or habits, it gives you an out. Oh, I didn't go last week. I'm not going to go this week. So having habits and routines to achieve your goals, those processes are super important. All those little victories.
One thing, and I love that this episode in general, just because of the idea of addressing mindset is so huge, and it's one of those that rarely gets touched on. And that is that because we all have our own mindset, we have a starting point. Where are we starting, and how do we want our mindset to change, and what do we want to change it into? If you basically have the mindset of a sheep and you hang out with sheep, that's about all you're ever going to be. If it's your ambition to not be a sheep and to be a wolf, you go hang out with the wolves. By keeping their company, you will pick up their habits. And this is something to be mindful of with accountability. And that is, you will pick up other people's attitudes and mindsets, whether you like it or not. You can like a person, but if they have a mindset that is going to be counter to what you want to be, you're going to wake up one day and go, I'm not where I want to be, and I don't know why. And it's because you have put yourself in the wrong company or the wrong company for too long. You've not sought out the right company, the right people that will nourish you and bring you and influence you to be that excellent level that you want to be at.
Well, and that's the challenge, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. You're challenging yourself. I mean, how many people do we see? And not always is it their fault. And this is what I see a lot when you travel to smaller areas. And Sean, you've done this a lot too. It's, it's hard, especially when they're geographically remote. It makes it even harder. But you go there and you got the top guy there, and unfortunately, he has 10 other nights he gets to fight locally or in the 4-hour distance that he is or whatever. So he could be very good, but it's very, very difficult for him to push himself even farther against people that are, end up into that world-class level.
Yeah. It depends on what the end goal was explained and how progression across the training and practice would get them there to compete with these individuals.
Yes. So. And that's the key, that challenge, constantly challenging yourself.
Yes.
Right. And that challenge doesn't need to be that physical challenge of going beating somebody up, because now we're into a goal scenario, and we'll be talking about that a little later. And that's not necessarily the goal. That's a great goal to be with, but the challenge is to push yourself and find ways to grow constantly. And if that's, I have the worst feet in the world, well, guess what? You should be working on, right? I don't do this throw very well. Well, I guess that's what you should be working on, right? And the better you set all these fundamentals in, the easier it is to tap back to that fundamental, even when you're having a bad day. Right? You people talk about that. I have a great day and you're beating everybody up, but when you have a bad day, everybody's beating you up. And that's probably because your fundamentals aren't good enough that, you build those fundamentals so you're halfway, and then you just drop down to those fundamentals, you're still beating people. there's there's a lot of tournaments, and I'm sure a number of you guys can say this. You go to a tournament and you're like, I had a terrible day, but you're the guy that's standing up winning at the end of the day with the winning the tournament, right? And it's and people like, how did you have a bad day when you won?
Oh, easy.
Right. It is easy. Right. And in fact, you could probably go back and tell yourself everything you did wrong, because you're like, man, my feet were crap. I got hit here because this is what this guy did. I had, I was too close here, whatever. You can probably go back, you go back and tell you could name every person that hit you that day and where.
And even realize I was lucky. Nobody caught my mistakes. I lucked my way through that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's one of those questions that I'm always asking is, of all the people that you beat today, how many of those fights did you win, and how many of those fights did your opponent lose?
Exactly. So the next two here are long term. I mean, we covered that, right? I mean, if you look at the attitude, you have to look at this as long term. I'm not going to be great in a year. Right. I'm not going to be great in 10 years, to tell you the truth. You could be a Duke and still not be great. Okay. And, is there, the best student is, even how great you are, you better be a student constantly.
Absolutely.
But there is nothing wrong with looking at striving to be great. Right? Just understand that means you're going to challenge yourself for the rest of your life.
Always having that beginner's mind.
Yes.
Always important.
Yes. Always being the perpetual student.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's one of those things I learned early on from Fabian and then later from Sagan is that long term, it's like winning crown is neat and all, but but being great, being world class, winning crown is one of those things that just may or may not kind of happen along the way for that. And for me, once I kind of got introduced to that concept, it was really, I had literally set a goal of, I want to be the best fighter in the world, because I always knew on some level that I would never be able to make that claim. So as long as there was always that, it's like, well, I'm not the best fighter in the world yet, so there's more work for me to do.
That's correct.
And the closer and closer you get to, like, when you have people say, oh, well, that's the best fighter, I'm like,
yeah.
You get a little uncomfortable when people start placing you in, top X number.
Yeah.
Even though you say that that's where you want to be, like, once you believe that you're that good, you lose the motivation for driving to be more. And that's one of the things that's always kept me going, is that idea that, yeah, I'm going to say that I want to be the best fighter in the world, and I know I'll never get there. So you got to keep trying.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's exactly, when I was coming up, what I said was, I want to be the best fighter in the world, but I want to do it for 20 years. I want them to know I could walk into a crown tournament and win anytime I want. Right. And a number of years ago, I hit 20. I'm like, I'm in trouble now. and now I'm starting to realize how much I don't know. So I'm far. I got so much more to learn. I probably have another 20 years.
And that's part of the curse of being long term, right? You've got all this success, but as you educate yourself further, you motivate and dedicate yourself further, suddenly you go, oh, wait, I don't know this. Oh, and I don't know. Wait, there's all this stuff I don't know. But that, again, is part of being that perpetual student, and part of having the desire and the drive to keep right on going.
Yeah. And that's the key and that's it. It's that desire to keep going. Right. And that's that long-term piece. And sometimes long-term builds on itself. You're in for 10 years. Mm-hmm. I told this on another session, and this is something both me and Ron Golder talk about, because he's been around on that path the same with me. And we look at each other, we're like, we aren't dying every day to go to practice, believe me. But people are like, what drives you to go to practice? Like, because I don't want to, because I'm afraid to miss one. Because if I miss it, the second one's just as easy, if not easier. And then the third, I'm not sure if I have to worry about going anymore.
Right. Right. One of the drivers for me was, if I don't go, what am I going to miss?
That's exactly it. So last piece on this one was risk,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, and that becomes a pretty big one. You risk a lot by dedicating you to the path, because you might not make it.
True.
Right? I mean, you might not, if the path is, hey, I want to be great and I want to win crowns and I want to get belted. There's, if you can't stay with it, or life changes where it makes it harder, or you're moving from kingdom to kingdom, it becomes more difficult. There's risk, but it doesn't mean that risk isn't worth it. Right? And that becomes a big part of that.
I think a part of that risk, and probably something that hits people on an emotional level, is, well, what if I commit myself to this and I find I don't have the potential, or I lose my motivation? Like, let's say, and I think a lot of people come into fighting and they all dream of, like, wouldn't it be great to be as good as a knight, like to be that caliber of a knight caliber fighter? And what happens when they find out either they run in, it's harder than they thought. They jump in and they start buying some plywood to make a shield, and they buy some armor, and they kind of get into it. And I found this both with myself way back in the day, and with a lot of people. They get their whole kit together, and then they go to fighting practice about 3 or 4 times, and they get their ass bruised up and beaten, and they're like, what did I just invest in? What did I really make a mistake? Is this really what I want to do? And I've seen a lot of people, I mean, even at a low level, before you even start thinking about winning crowns and getting to that level, even it's a low level risk for that. And it's a very real one. For me, as I run a dojo and I have students, the biggest stress is, of all the belt tests, is probably the first one. And as you get, to black belt and whatnot, you're like, you think of it like a small test because it's not really that technically demanding or whatnot, but you have the least preparation for it. You have the least amount of, and probably the most emotion attached to it. As you get used to testing, you become like acclimated to it. And so the risk becomes that emotional, from the emotional side of you, not just from the risk to your body of getting bruised up, or finding like you need to lose 80 pounds because you just can't fight when you weigh 380 or whatever it is. But know that everybody, just like we were talking before, so we're all human. Everybody goes through these things. Don't assume just because you look around and you don't see anybody kind of breaking down that they haven't gone through that. Like, we all have gone through it, and at different levels. We won't go into too big a detail, but I think that the risk is not just what you'd see at the surface. It goes underneath. And we all have faltered when it comes to motivation. We've all faltered when it comes to, do I really want to do this anymore? Do I want to go farther? Do I want to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars in travel just to get better and better and better? And it's like, sorry, but I can't. I've got kids, or I've got, a career, or I've got these other things. Those factors of risk are out there. That you will run into them. I guarantee it.
True. And what's interesting about risk is that the other side of it is opportunity. Mm-hmm. And if you balance that in your mind to a point where you really deal with it in that push me, pull you of risk and opportunity, and you can see the value while you feel the risk, it's really a positive type of atmosphere for a trainee or a coach to go through.
So there was a question, and I'm going to throw this question out there. It was a good question, and I just want to make sure everybody knows. We definitely love questions, guys. I apologize. This episode has a lot to it. We're trying to get through a few, and then we'll hit all the questions. Keep them coming. It always makes our sessions that much better, our episodes. The question was, what tools do you have students and squires use to maintain those habits and routines?
I think I can front this one up because I was
pretty
just
much.
talking with my student today in class, and they were asking about there's a young lady, a student of mine, and she comes in. Her schedule really only lets her attend 1 day a week, and sometimes she makes it and sometimes she doesn't. And we got to talking about her a little bit, and I said, I had to tell her, and every student I'll tell the same thing to: what you practice, you get better at. If you show up twice a month, how good do you expect to be? Versus you show up twice a week or 3 times a week or 5 times a week. You invest in yourself and that will pay off. It doesn't matter the level of your talent. It doesn't really matter how quickly you progress. But if you don't practice something, don't expect to get much better at it. And I equate the martial art I teach to SCA fighting is almost the same. It's like, imagine learning a new language or learning to play a musical instrument. If you do that 1 hour a month or 2 hours a month, how good do you expect to be in 6 months or a year? You're going to suck. In fact, you're probably just throwing away those few hours because you just won't have enough time to really start making progress. But once you do what we were talking about in the last episode, which is schedule yourself into, this is important to me, I want to start tackling it, and have a reasonable schedule, and you just relentlessly roll forward with it, you will get better. Never beat yourself up about how quickly or slowly you're learning, as long as you're making progress. Like that to me is, you have that conversation with somebody and it makes sense to them. I think every human being can relate to that of, yeah, how could I expect to get any better if I always am doing something else? Like, and that's kind of a light bulb thing with a lot of people. Yeah, okay, I'm going to make this important and get better at it. Spend time at it.
Right. And one of the other things is that, there's a lot of emphasis on, and you just spoke to it, Tristan. What are you doing here? For you, it'd be in the dojo.
Mm-hmm.
But when I release you, student, what are you doing at home? If you have to miss 2 visits to the dojo, what can I expect you to be doing away from the dojo? And it's the same thing with practices, right? Expectations. If the student is amiable and amicable to it, setting expectations is not a problem, right? And you are indeed trying to promote their success by saying, I will work with you on this plan. I realize you can only be here once a week. Let's address what you can do away from here. And if you have questions, you can feel free to email me, phone me, whatever it is. So some of the tools are journaling, right? Journaling what was expected and journaling what occurred. And then journaling the questions, journaling the answers. So there are a number of tools, but again, it depends on what we've talked about before: the desire, the drive, the dedication, the determination, and the devotion of the trainee and the coach. There are always 2 sides to this.
And coming up with other venues of practice if people
Absolutely
are available certain times, all right, if it's only on a Friday afternoon, come to my house and I'll get some more people over. It's my job to bring trainers and bring people that you can learn from. So getting those people you can learn from, or hey, there's a practice 30 minutes away, I'll pick you up on that day and we'll go hit that practice, and trying to support. If they have the drive to get their stuff in the car, then get them where they need to go.
Also, you can set that goal, right? I mean, you can make that agreement with your squire or your student and say, hey, out of this month, how many practices you plan on to attend? How many times we're going to get to fight? And then, set that goal and review. And it's the big piece is review, because that review actually makes a huge amount of difference to the people, because you're making time for them. They're going to make time for you. And because this is about them, psychologically, they see you making that time, they're going to make that time back. And I know in our practices, I started a thing probably 15 plus years ago, and I post all the names of everybody to go to practice every time. And I started that because I had somebody that was like, oh, I'm at all the practices, I missed maybe 1 or 2. And I went through and I counted. It's like, here's 1 year. Here's how many times you made it. Now, how many do you missed?
And that's a
Because-
big motivation too. I mean, we
Well, and
film
also-
practices, so
Yep. And you got to be truthful to yourself.
yeah, honesty.
Right. We've talked about it before. Plans must be realistic, right? If they need to be modified, that's fine,
Mhm.
right? But at the outset, they need to be based on a realistic possibility of outcome.
Exactly.
Well, and we keep running back to this through all of these things. It's all about truth. You always have to stop, whether it's daily or weekly, and reevaluate your truth and see where you're at. It's just a
Yes.
process of learning, whether it's physical or mental. If you go down the path of I know this, and this, and these things are happening, and you roll that into a tournament, and you have all those lies, it makes it easier for somebody of a higher caliber to lie to you because you already believe half of them. So truth is a number one aspect.
Well, you know what? On that note, why don't you just roll into the next 5 obstacles?
All right. The next 5 obstacles: overinvestment, perfectionism, fear of failure, expectations, and then emotions. That's a big bag.
That's a big bag,
Wow.
man. Let me tell you. Holy crap.
Wow.
That could be an episode by itself.
Heck yeah. I mean, overinvestment. I mean, how would you define just
I'd call that one biting off more than you can chew.
Oh, yeah.
Getting all lathered up and going, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to train 5 days a week for an hour every day. I'm going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm going to hit the pelt for 1,000 shots, and good luck.
and then you break yourself, and now you have to sit out for a minute, and then
You'll
it
do
again.
that once for about
yourself.
20 minutes, and then you're going to be like, oh my God, my elbow hurts. I'm half asleep. I hit myself in the head with the sword. I'm going back to bed. Screw this. And that's
And then you failed, and it
Yeah.
doesn't feel good, and you don't achieve.
Then
Right.
emotionally, you're done, right?
Right.
Manage expectations.
Mhm.
Your
Right.
mental
Well, one
state.
of those things about overinvestment is if it completely just overrules or takes over the mental side, oh boy.
Yeah.
I mean, if defeatism comes on because of all the things that aren't working, wow, now it's time to back up, regroup, and restart. But some people have a hard time with that.
And that's where trainers and coaches can come.
Absolutely.
Really handy.
And it also it's a good place. So sometimes this is where a coach has to look and go, he is way over invested into something
Yes.
that he is just not getting right now.
Yes.
I'm going to pull him into something else to release that, to allow him to grow. And then we're going to come back to it. We're
Yes.
going to take it in smaller chunks so that he can get through that later.
Yeah.
But some people will start into something and it doesn't work, and they just keep driving into it. And it's harder and harder and harder. And that's where somebody can help guide you and okay, let's do this instead.
Yeah, refocusing. That's a big one. I like
Yeah,
these-
yeah, Brannos, when we had that episode a couple of weeks ago with the neurodivergent learning models,
Mhm.
we had your Squire, Sive on,
Yeah.
and she was saying that some days you have those days where she doesn't have the spoons, she doesn't have the capacity to do the training stuff, and so what you got to do is just okay, we're going to go back to what you can do.
Yes.
You're just going to do these drills that and you can do these things, and you're going to have your success today because you did some
That's right.
work on something that you have the capacity for today, and maybe next week you'll have the capacity for more,
Right.
and then we can move on from there. But sometimes you have to break that out and say your brain is full,
Yep.
you don't have this, so let's work on something else.
And you get to that frustration level because you're so overcommitted that it's just not going to work anymore.
Right. Yep.
and
Yep.
it leads right into that perfectionist mentality of if it's
Yeah.
not perfect, it's not worth doing. And I think there's a huge range between learning a technique and perfection. And
Right. Right. And a lot of time.
yes. And
Well,
a lot
and
of
it's a
talent.
trap, right?
Yeah, totally.
Perfectionism is a trap.
Yes.
Right. Right. It's a danger, an absolute caution.
Yeah. It's always an evolution, especially when you're talking about it from a mental aspect. There's always some way to tweak it, adjust it. There's, hey, my body's different this year than it was last year. I'm stronger, I'm weaker, I'm not as fast, I'm faster. There's always things that are going to adjust a technique, whether it's mental or physical.
Yeah. Or I didn't spend as much time on it because I was learning something else. and I got to go back to it. Doesn't mean that you've lost it. It means that it may not be as good as it once was. Now, that doesn't also mean that it still doesn't work.
True.
Right. So the key is, if you're looking for, so what happens in perfectionism is, if you're looking at something and you're driving to something and overcommitting to something because you're trying to reach that, then you're giving up on everything else.
You're missing the rest of the pyramid.
There you go. Yes.
You know, we really need to put this one on our ugly coach habits of the ones who absolutely pound on their students to have everything perfect and scream at them. Everything is not perfect. And like they'll nitpick the tiniest little things and just say you suck because this isn't perfect. And I love the way that you describe it as a trap, because it's not only an external trap for a coach, it's an internal trap for the student who says, I can never get perfection. Screw it. I'm done.
Yeah. Emotionally, no, I'm disconnected.
The motivation just goes right down the toilet.
Exactly. And especially if the student's perception is that the coach wants absolute perfection. Well, now you've affected them on the mental side. And wow.
All the technique.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You can create in a student an ugly pit that they can't crawl out of.
Right. An unobtainable goal.
Yeah.
Well, and that falls right into the next one, right?
The fear of failure.
Yes.
Yeah. That, I mean, I've suffered from that, stepping on attorney fields, and all of a sudden you get stuck into that. Oh shit! What if I fail? Well, okay, that's the risk you took by stepping onto the field. It's going to happen. Come to terms with it. But
Right.
you can get, that's a dark place to go.
Yeah. And it's also hard to train somebody out of it, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the biggest piece is, if you get caught in that feel, I can tell you right now, Sean and I probably both look and go, we're afraid to fail too, because we feel like everybody's looking at us and saying, you should be winning.
Because they are.
Right?
Oh, nice.
And when you don't, it's a big deal.
Yeah, when everybody else applauds when you lose.
Right.
Yeah.
Sean, I got to tell you, for me, it's not an issue.
Yeah. You've been watching me fail for years. I mean, you get used to it.
Oh, nice.
I didn't say that, but now that you have.
Well, I was going to mention, though, that when I first started working with Sagan, I mean, I obviously had some ideas about what my fight was and all this, and Sagan was always very, very generous in, it's like, why are you doing this? I'm like, oh well, blah blah blah, and he's like, okay, go ahead. And then at some point it fails, and he's like, okay, next.
Now why are you doing this?
Now what are you doing? Now what are you doing with this? Is like, so your plan failed, so moving right along. But that's one of the things you're talking about like not expecting perfection. He didn't come along and say, these are the way you have to do these things. He created an environment where I was able to have a concrete failure, if you will, to recognize a failure and recognize that what I was doing wasn't a long-term solution. But especially with me being a kinesthetic learner, Sagan understood that,
yes,
he's got these ideas about how things are going to go, and until he sees for himself, until he feels that failure, we're not going to be able to move on.
Right.
It's a positive.
That's interesting that you say that. If I could just jump in with one, is that I really believe that when you train students, you want them to go through quality reps. You want their repetitions to be good and solid. They start to get a feel for how they should be moving. What I found is be helpful is tell them, all right, just for a couple, I want you to do it wrong. And I want your body to feel how wrong it feels.
Yes.
Get your brain to acknowledge that this doesn't feel right, whether it's stand up so their knees aren't bent enough, or step to the wrong place, or just don't burn that in, but just appreciate the difference of feel between a good rep and a shitty one. And then it will sink. It'll really burn into the programming in your brain.
And you're there when they go, I can't do that anymore.
Yes, that's exactly it. Sorry, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
No, it's all good. I just think teaching your students that failure is a good thing, getting them to wrap their brains around A lot of times, your biggest successes will be those worst failures. But if you're afraid to fail, then the failures that happen aren't real failures. They're because of your fear. So
Right.
you're not going to learn as much from that because you're not allowing yourself to go out and just really fail with your technique. You're failing because you're afraid.
When you're
And the trick
creating,
is, oh, go ahead.
you're creating a false positive.
Correct.
And the trick and the hard part on this is you have to be willing to fail to learn, right? I mean, it's not willing. You need to fail sometimes to learn.
Not even
But
sometimes. I think all the great
yeah.
successes come from failures.
But on the other side of it, the plan is, and I look at you, you need to go out and win. You need to go out and perform to your best.
Yep.
And then when you do lose, you have something really to learn there. Not because you performed poorly, but because you performed at the best you could. You may have failed in some places there, and you have something to learn now.
True.
You know, this is I think a good time to mention, because as people are putting up videos of themselves practicing and whatnot, what Brannos just mentioned is one area of a problem when it comes to assessing somebody's fighting. If you go out and just do kind of a casual sparring session and you're not really trying your hardest, it's hard to analyze that.
Yep.
When you go out into a competitive tournament environment, or even in a practice bout where you say, all right, we're going to go like we're going in Crown. This is my best game. I'm not screwing around here or just doing some practice sparring. That's what a coach needs to see and analyze. And so I'm glad you brought this up, because I think it's a good reminder for people. If you do want to have video analyzed, put on your best game and go film that.
And that doesn't mean go out and brawl with each other and just
No. Put the smartest fight you can put forward. Yeah. Put that on tape.
Yeah, and don't and the second piece is, if you're going to send those, don't send the ones you just win. It's like, hey, look how great I was.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. You're going to be really disappointed when I look and I go, I'd like you to go review every one of those and tell me how many times you throw an offside and how many times you throw an onside.
Right.
Right? And then tell me how many times when you threw the offside you hit, and tell me how many times you hit with an onside. And you start evaluating which ones works better than the other.
Yeah.
Right. And those, so, that's the idea. You have to perform, right? So you have to be truthful again. We're running right back into truth.
Yeah.
You have to send us video, or you have to look at all your video, not the things that you want to see.
Yeah, because we'll see the feelings in your fight. If you're just going out there and having this recreational fight, or you're just not, you're kind of lackadaisical about it, that comes across as not committed into it. You're not giving us the intent, your deliberateness.
Right. Because we will discern that the energy disappeared, or the focus is off, or why are you just screwing around?
Yeah, and if you want us to tell you what needs to be improved on in your fight, we can't do that by looking at the fights you won.
Yeah.
In order for us to know what needs to be fixed, we need to know what's broken.
And that may be your focus gets broken, or you have a wavering focus, and we need to be able to, it's nothing physical. It's your focus and your attitude presented in a fight. In fact, you guys covered that last week. You're like, oh, that was a new guy, and you went down 12 levels to meet where you're essentially competing with him, and you didn't need to. And then when you fought the knight, you fought at that level. You tell me, was that a technical thing? No, that's a mental thing.
And sometimes it's not deliberate.
No, and that's the problem.
Fight to the level of their opponent, which will get you killed.
True.
all day long in a tournament.
I refer to that often as mirroring, where it's easy to mirror somebody else's energy, whether it's high or low, or even messy. You can take a clean fighter who's not staying in his game, put him against a messy fighter, and they'll turn into a mess themselves. And that's one of those things to get over as you advance along enough, to stay within your clean, tight, stay within your game and not be drawn into somebody else's energy.
Yep. People do that deliberately. I'll deliberately reduce intent and slow a fight down.
Yeah.
Mirror me. Oh, sweet. Let's get all relaxed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're not really fighting.
Yeah. Let me bring that energy right on down, so you feel safe in coming right on over here.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because people do mirror. And so if you bring your energy up, they bring their energy up. And then like a runner, you can leave them up in that high energy zone while you reduce your heart rate. And then the time they realize it, you got your breath back, and you can, as they're coming down, you go back up, and now they never have that chance to reduce their heart rate and catch their breath. And that's that whole idea of that constant pressure. That it's another subject, but that's one thing. But people ask me, it's like, give me 100%. I'm like, I'll give you what it takes to beat you. Right?
Yeah.
And that may not be 100%. I might stand in front of you and give you nothing. If I got a fast young guy, that's exactly what I'll do. I'll get right in front of them and I'll give them nothing. Because you know what they're waiting for? Because this is what they rely on, is they're waiting for you to give them the adrenaline.
Yeah.
Right? So
Well,
as soon as you start doing, they're like, yeah, it's a fight. No. So you give them nothing, they don't know how to do that. And so when they initiate, their adrenaline is really low, and then you can pop above it and then come back down again.
Yep.
So just be aware of those things. Let's jump into expectation and emotions.
So, I mean, expectations, you go into that tournament expecting to win without the tools to win, or expecting to lose, even worse.
Even worse.
Sorry, my cat is.
The show is officially cat butt approved.
Yeah. False expectations. You go in preconceived notions, expecting certain things to work in your fight, expecting an opponent to bring a fight like you were just talking about and not get that. All of that can be a huge detriment.
Don't we have an entire episode on that coming up?
I think something close.
Pretty close to it.
And then right into emotions. You lose
That
your
was a hard
first
one.
fight, and then you live in that fight and you get sucked into an emotional turmoil. Trying to calm those down and keep your emotions level and present and honest. A lot of people, or you get mad. I love it when my opponents get mad. That makes me very happy. You got to, not personal. You can't.
Well, and that's the thing, is people look at the emotional thing and they try to think, well, I'm going to try to remain cold and distant. Well, we're doing an activity that's very exciting. Like, everybody gets into this because it's fun, it's exciting. They're emotionally invested in it, especially if you go on a highly competitive tournament like a Royal tournament or something like that. But even just an average everyday tournament, you're excited to get in armor and go out and fight with, swords and shields and be in armor. And you can't take the emotional element out. So don't even try.
True.
But managing it is
the key.
Learning how to manage your emotions, and I hate to say control them, because that almost sounds like too control freak, but you can manage your own emotional, the things that are going on inside of you. You can manage those things.
Right.
You can't totally eliminate them, but you can not let them run you.
And part of it, I think, is an adrenaline dump. I mean, everybody gets a bit of that adrenaline spike.
Oh yeah.
Like, you're a caffeine guy. You like chug a Mountain Dew before you fight or something, and that can really swing you one way or the other. And you gotta learn to breathe through that.
Yeah. You don't know a Duke that did a Red Bull between every round in his crown.
Oh God! And he was awake for a week and a half.
That's right. I think he just woke up from his nap.
Wow.
But no, it's being able to manage it. And I heard this a really great way, as I guess Buddhists will talk about this, in terms of managing people that tend to have these waves of emotion that come over them, and they feel like they're just being dragged along by everyone that comes along. They say, imagine like you're on a train and you're on a train car, and the train's cruising down the track really fast, and every car that comes is a new emotion. It's anger, it's elation, it's frustration, it's bang, 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 bang. He said, now step away from the track and watch the train go by, and choose the cars that you want to engage with, the happiness, the joy. Sometimes you have to deal with, a frantic situation, whether you're excited or even a little agitated, but be careful about the ones that you invest in, the rage, the anger, the dark side of those emotional things. And I found that was a pretty helpful perspective, that many people have commented that it's helped them separate from those waves that keep coming in. you know, and the tournament can be those waves. And one of those train cars might be intimidation. Like, oh my God, I'm just about to fight somebody who's been fighting for 25 years. They're just going to, and they're amazing. They're going to blow me out. That is a wave coming in at you. You cannot let yourself be caught underneath it.
Right. And the flip side to that would be overconfidence. Oh,
Right.
I've fought God for years. I have just wiped the field with them every single time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
In fact, I saw that in the Cornet tourney that I hosted. I had a really good friend that wanted to follow me, and he made it to the finals, and he didn't even win two out of the three fights against somebody who he beats all the time. And he admitted to me afterwards, he's like, I knew I had him. Every practice I go, I beat this guy. He's like, and I'm thinking about my investiture outfit. Like, oh God.
Yeah.
No, that overconfidence, and it just, he lost it.
I think people grossly underestimate the emotional investment in each individual fight. You know, just the idea of stepping into range to engage combat requires an emotional expenditure.
Mm-hmm. It does.
And again, it's like Tristan said, it's how you manage that emotional expenditure, because if you don't manage it, it is exhausting.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say.
You will get wiped out
Oh, yeah.
from just the emotion alone, not the physical exertion, but the emotional expenditure is exhausting.
Right. I mean, each of these obstacles executed in reasonable measure, okay, that's one thing. It's when we get to the dramatic and drastic offshoots of them that the caution is right there. And sometimes it's so hard to actually pay attention to it.
And remember that, you know, we're talking about emotion in fight. There's emotion in practice. There's frustration and all of these things. And it's wears on you there too. It's like, you know, rain and wind on rock. It may be slow, but it'll wear you down.
Right.
And that rolls right all the way back to the top is, what are you there for?
Right.
And sometimes you have to go back and you have to let all of that go, that emotion go, and say, why am I here?
Right.
Right. I have to do that all the time. Sometimes I'm like, why am I putting all this out? Why am I doing this? Why am I trying to find a fight practice? Why am I trying to get people to go to practice? Why am I putting people in armor? All of this stuff. And then I want to point it at everybody else. And then I go back to that top one and I'm like, because I want to be better.
Yep.
Yeah. And that covers right into the next 5 keys of training, which is perspective. And you open the door for this right now. And the word perspective has got there's so many angles that you could look at this from, but you hit a key part of it, which is, what am I here to do? Why am I here? What personal goal am I fulfilling? Perspective also comes into, how am I going to do it? Where, you know, if you just think, well, I'm just going to show up and then ride the ride of whatever happens at practice. Like, if that is your perspective, you will be along for the ride. Whatever tends to happen there is somebody else's deal. And therefore you're losing the accountability part. If your perspective is, I am going to make a plan for what I want for this practice. If there's somebody to help me, that's cool. If my plan is to show up and my mentor is there, I'm going to listen to my mentor and I'm going to absorb everything that he or she gives me. A lot of times, and I find this on the mat too, and I had this at any practice, you come in with a certain amount of, usually you have a good attitude, but every once in a while you'll bring garbage from the real world in, or you'll bring something else in that's weighing you down. That perspective can impede your training. So perspective is one of those things you have to always maintain. Be careful about how you're looking at what you are doing. It's easy to slip kind of off. So does anybody else want to kick in on the perspective part?
Well, I like your point about the baggage you bring to practice, or the baggage you bring to a tournament. I am always training my guys and gals, my students. When you step in to participate with another person, we have a pretty special sport we get to do here. A lot of it's one-on-one. That person's giving you their best. Leave your baggage in your armor bag. Leave all that other crap. They paid the price. They've gone to all the practices. they want your best. Your best isn't the crap you had for lunch today, or that your boss yelled at you, or that bills aren't paid. Take a break from all that other stuff. This is a pretty special time you have with another person. Give them your best. You'll get their best, and you'll learn something new. You'll have a good experience.
I wrote a paper on this years ago, what I refer to as the purity of the field. The fighting field is for me is a sanctuary, right? Everything that is on the field, like there's no subterfuge, there's no guesswork. You're there to kill them, they're there to kill you. It's very straight up, very very plain. But it's a place that if you allow it to be a sanctuary, like the stuff that Octa was talking about, the bills you got to pay, and your boss being, mad at you, and all these external things that, this is the one place where you can go to escape from all of that for just a moment. But it requires you being able to leave your baggage at the door and being able to check that at the side of the field and not bring that there, because while the field will grant you that purity and that sanctuary, sorry, my dog, you need to respect the field as well and not bring that baggage with you.
Because remember that mirroring point we talked about a few minutes ago? You bring garbage in and it will oftentimes get mirrored, and that's no good.
Right.
So let's move on to consistency. Yep. I think we covered a lot on consistency already, and how important consistency is, right?
Well, we missed the train like you compete.
Oh, yes.
That one's in
Sorry.
there. Yeah. And absolutely. Right. I guess what Musashi talked about this. You can't fight any better than you train.
Yes. Yes.
You always your performance will always sync to the level of your training. There's all kinds of these phrases out there that talk about how you train. Now, that doesn't mean get in your armor and go balls to the wall every time you face somebody. There are ways to work on certain tools without it being 100% intensity. But that said, every minute you spend at a practice should be used constructively to get you farther along. Don't screw around and just coast or play around or waste time, because you're not just wasting your own time. You're probably wasting somebody else's time, your coach's time, your opponent's time, or something. And yes, you may not, for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you may not be working on what you want to work on, but it's constructive to help your partner work on something they need to develop. Because just like Brannos said, if you bring your practice up, that will make you better. So it's consider it more of a long-term investment than all right, every minute I need to be making me better. That's kind of a narcissistic approach to your practice.
And if you have a beginner's mind, I learned a lot from teaching.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're in that mindset while you're helping somebody work through something, you can, hey, why didn't you step there? And then you have a dialogue.
The most dreaded, why do you do this?
Yes.
And you're like, I got nothing. I don't know why. And then you have to figure it out. That's
one of the best opportunities is when they go, but what if I did this? Yeah. And your little brain goes, whoa, I've never gone there before.
Yep. So train like you compete. Even if you're going a little lower intensity, keep your movement discipline tight. Don't let your body get sloppy and your movements get sloppy because you think, oh, I'm working with somebody new and I can be kind of lazy. Kick yourself in the ass and go, no, I'm not going to be lazy. I'm not going to unleash the hounds on them, but I'm also going to keep my defense tight. And I'm going to, because of that mirroring, young, newer fighters will pick up on your body movements. Mm-hmm. If you show them garbage, they will learn garbage. Right. If you show them what a good fighter should look like, even though you're not unleashing 100% of offense, they'll start to pick up your defensive cues. They'll start picking up your movement cues. They'll perceive that and learn it. So be an example, even if you're not at 100% competition level.
I think that goes into the other quality, the quality of the fight. I think that covers that piece. I think the one we covered a lot on consistency now, and consistency. It's hard to always be perfect, and if you're not feeling it a day, it doesn't mean that you can't go to practice and still work on one thing.
Absolutely.
And like you just said, if that's like, I'm just gonna try to stay perfect in my footwork today. If I get that done, I win. You don't have to expend tons of energy. My arms hurt. Well, work on your legs. My legs hurt. Work on your arms. And it's that kind of thing. But the one I really like here and like to cover last in this group is experiment.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. That's a man, it really, the others we all know, but then we look and we say experiment. What is meant by experiment? What do you guys think?
I mean, I really like to do it twofold. One, go out and start initiating some movement and mechanics and see how my opponents respond to me. What are they seeing and how is it causing them to react? And then with video, I really like to go back and watch the video and see how I responded to certain tells and techniques from my opponents. What did they get me to do? How did I react? Did I react that way every time? So I experiment through the intent back and forth of what am I getting from my opponent? What am I actually giving to them? Is it deliberate or is it accidental and I need to work on?
Part of that too is the idea of what I just mentioned a few minutes ago, where the trainee goes, but what if I did this? That's their mental side going, hey, I've seen this one thing like a bunch of times, but what if? And then they feel the freedom to voice that to the trainer and you get to explore it together.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with that is the what if, and encouraging, especially mid-range unbelted fighters who are maybe right on the cusp of, finding their knightliness. I had one of my squires that one of the things that kind of pushed him over the edge in his fighting to kind of get him knighted was he found that path of discovery and that experimentation and that what if, and there was all this, what happens when I put my foot here? Oh, okay, well that hurt. Well, what happens if I put my foot here this way? And just the way you just that whole path of discovery, that whole what if thing is just an encouraging those, especially the unbelted fighters, because there's so much that gets wrapped up in you have to be good to get knighted, or you have to prove yourself, or you have to, like, all these expectations that we pile on these unbelted fighters. But I think giving them the freedom to say just what if and indulge in that what if, and without any concern for whether or not you're doing what is going to get you united, right? Let's get over that part of it and just get you into, let you have that discovery, let you have that experimentation, because that's where you're really going to find who you are as a fighter, is through that experimentation. That's the difference between doing the things I've told you to do and you being your own fighter.
Right.
Yep.
Exploration of the techniques and owning them and making them yours.
Right.
Yes.
And one thing I want to add on, because when you talk about experiment, the thing that leapt in my mind is, how do I steal from people? I see something, like who's got the best leg shot, and as you categorize it, you can envision them doing it. And you're like, what would it feel like to do it the way they did it? And you try to simulate how they get their success. Like, to me, that's where my experimentation really, that was at least half of it. Is I want to steal that guy's technique, or I want to do this as well as they do it. And when you start out, it's rough, you screw it up, it's not right, there's something wrong with it, but you can spend some time hammering on it and start to refine it. And the more you do that, you start to analyze and start breaking down what other people are doing, so that the components, or you can identify the components you should be doing. That's where, to me, you take it into experimentation.
So last piece on experimentation here is, I'm going to take it one more place, and that is, you've gotten where you've got, right? You're a Duke, you're going to practice, you're beating up people all the time, you're a very good fighter, and you're complacent.
Oh,
yeah.
Right? This is the time, guys. There are so many great sports out there to take a look and say, ooh, look what that guy's doing. I wonder if that would work in what we do. And and this is the time to be creative and experiment with new stuff and see how it does, because that keeps you driving on the path forward. That keeps you still being a student, even though there's not a teacher above you. Right? So for the guys out there that are like comfortable, stop being fucking comfortable. Sorry, but that's in the end, be a student. And if that means you have to find it somewhere else and you got to go to the internet, you got to go to YouTube and you got to look at HMB or HEMA or, you know, foam, I don't care. Take a look and see if there's something there you could look. All right, Sagan, you want to cover this next one?
I will be more than happy to take these on. So, as it happens, performance-based training, practice, and combat are the program that I brought up for myself to utilize in the training, practice, and combat of others, in getting them to be performance-based in that they are realistic in, and especially these following things: motivation, confidence, intensity, focus, and state of mind. When we look at these, they are essential for all athletes, as most of the things we're talking about tonight. However, when we're talking about on the mental side, I can take you to a Pell and have you physically show me things. However, I can't take you to a Pell and have you mentally show me things. So when we're training and we're practicing and we're doing combat, we come back to these points. Motivation. Okay, so what's your motivation in training, practice, and combat? There are 3 different states, right? If you have no motivation in your training, then you have to answer the question, why not, right? Because training leads to practice, which leads to combat. So motivation is one of those things. We've spoken of it in a number of different ways tonight. You know, I just can't see myself going to practice. Tristan said, well, wait a minute, right? But on the other side of that is, you know, you're right, let's not go. And then it's like, so if you're not motivated to go to practice, are you motivated to train? And then once you get to the combat field, the question of motivation changes. Brannos, you've been in this a long time. Motivation, crown tournament. It's the first fight. You're about to enter the field. What is it?
My motivation is to execute what I've done perfectly through all of this bout. Doesn't matter who's on the field. I got to execute, read, and build my fight.
Right. Octamasades.
Motivation, first fight, effortless power. I want to go out there. I want to own that field and control the intensity of the fight. It's all about maneuvering it and killing it with one blow.
Right. Duke Sean.
My primary motivation when I enter a crown these days is to demonstrate to my kingdom the manner in which I think we should conduct ourselves in the list.
Okay.
And that means that I am either going to destroy whoever is in front of me, or I am going to accept my loss with grace and dignity.
Yeah. Tristan.
I'd say pretty close to Brannos. Fight smart, no mistakes.
Right.
Keep it tight.
Exactly. It's one of those things that when we get to this point in performance-based training, practice, and combat, you have trained and you have practiced to perform combat. You are now being asked to perform on this day in this fight with these weapons against that opponent to the best of your ability. You know for a fact you've trained. You know for a fact you've practiced. And now, here it comes. Here comes the proof. Win, lose, or draw, okay? And there's no negative, positive on those. But your motivation must be in place. If you don't have the motivation, we're going to lead right into the next one. Confidence. Brannos.
You have to be 100% believe in yourself. And that's fundamental. Confidence is you waver in confidence, and that's an opportunity. You know, great fighters out there will break down your confidence in a lot of different ways. We see it in boxing through the jab. You touch somebody in the face, they're not thinking about hitting you anymore. They're thinking about why they got touched in the face.
Yes.
Right? You touch in the face more than once. Now their confidence, they don't know if they can actually block you or block the strikes. And you've learned more that maybe that jab turns into a straight punch.
Right. Right.
So breaking somebody's confidence down is a big part of this game, and not allowing your confidence to be broke down, or stepping back for a second and readjusting and coming, nope, this is not going to happen. We're going to go back in. My technique's going to get better. I'm going to get more disciplined.
Right.
And by the
Octamasades?
way, the mindset of thinking when you explain to yourself, well, is it impossible for me to make it to practice? This comes right into, is it impossible for me to lay a stick on this guy?
There we go.
Is it impossible for me to block what he's throwing at me? Is it impossible for me to figure out a way not to be his victim?
Right.
When you start saying, yes, there is a way. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to figure it out. That's a mindset change that starts at you getting your ass to practice, and it culminates in you being on that field.
Right. Right.
It's a mental
Octamasades?
habit.
On confidence is built from all these things we've talked about, all this pyramid we've built. And then when you go out on the field, my job is to break your confidence, like Brannos was talking about. You start to bust that confidence, and it goes from confidence, then they start questioning, then fear sets in, then a little bit of anger, and then frustration. And that frustration, the killing part's easy. So robbing somebody of confidence, or robbing yourself of confidence, is detrimental.
All right. Duke Sean?
The confidence for me was one of the big things that I had to get over before I won Coronet List, and which was partially wrapped up in the coulda, woulda, shoulda nonsense that I was feeding myself. But basically, the thing that changed for me was when I finally was able to say, I am going to do well in this list, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to win.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go deep, and people are going to know that I'm a threat, and I could win. I could potentially win, and that'd be cool. But I'm going to do well.
Right.
And if knowing that I'm going to do, and if I go out in 2, those are going to be 2 of the hardest fights that that the unexpected had won, and people will be cheering from the sidelines with me losing 2 fights. But it's knowing I'm going to do well. And that doesn't mean I'm going to win. That just means that I'm going to execute.
Right. One of the things we talked about being a negative of motivation is not having any. One of the negative things here of confidence is not having any, or having too much. And both of those are a cautionary tale, right? Because they can dramatically affect the mental side. And once the mental side is affected, performance, because it's a combination between physical and mental, will be affected. And it's one of those things, if you're overconfident, and Bob, the guy you fought for years, or Tristan's friend who knew he could concentrate on his garb in the finals, all of a sudden things go sideways. All right, intensity. For me, intensity is the fact that there's a way you have to, in good measure, understand what's going on, right? Your intensity. Sean, from your point of view, what is your intensity when it comes to performance?
So my intensity is making sure, especially in tournament, is to make sure that I am putting out the best possible fight that I have. Because I am okay with being beaten by somebody who is better. I'm okay with being beaten by somebody who put in more work than I did. But I'm really not okay with being beaten by myself, being beaten by putting out less than the best effort that I have. And I've had, I had an Outlands prize tourney that I went to in the finals years ago where, right from the get-go, I pulled up one of my Grand Squires in the first round, and I'm like, this is where you find out where we're at. And, I knew I had to execute. And then I went through, the first early rounds, I went through a handful of squires that I didn't know from other kingdoms. I'm like, you're going to get everything because I don't know anything about you. And
Right.
I'm just going to unload on this. And, and that sort of intensity carried me through the day pretty much. But it was, yeah, it's like, don't play with your food.
Right.
You know, I also want to mention one intensity trap that I've seen many, many, many times, and that is you go out, you play what you've trained to do, it's not working to your satisfaction, and you think, if I just dump some more intensity in here, and
Ooh.
I go harder and faster and really just try to turn up the knob, it'll work. And every time I've seen that work, it's usually not worked. It's been a disaster. When people scramble, they try to fight outside of their training or beyond it. It turns really sloppy. It's messy.
Injury.
Injuries start happening.
Yes.
It's bad news.
Right. Right. Tristan, while I've got you on this,
Mhm.
let's go. Intensity from the list field versus intensity on the mat.
One of the big lessons I took from SCA fighting to Aikido, which is, for those who don't know, is a hand-to-hand martial art that involves a lot of throwing joint locks. You're taking people, as fun as it is hitting them with a stick, turning them upside down and dropping them on the ground is even more fun. I'll just tell you. But one of the big things when you're muscling people around or trying to muscle people around by not using efficient leverage, good position, good footwork, you will pay dearly when you try to lift somebody up when you don't have a good position on them.
Right.
And this is where the injury starts happening. If you go more intense and you do get good leverage, you'll light somebody up and you'll hurt them. I mean,
Yes.
gravity is a bitch. Nothing hits harder than the planet. So managing energy and managing intensity is crucial, not only for safety's sake, but also for your own body. You know, you can't just crank it up. And from a self-defense perspective, you never know how long a fight's going to go. If you burn yourself up in 2 minutes, who's to say another person doesn't show up?
Right.
Now you got to go another couple of minutes, or maybe your fight lasts 10 minutes. So you can't just burn it all up. So that's what I would toss in for that one.
All right, my friend Octamasades, intensity.
Intensity. I hear what you guys are saying with the kind of very outward, kind of more, I don't know if aggression is the right word, but very intense, moving into the fight. Intensity for me is can be more underneath,
Mental.
like a
Mental
duck,
intensity.
right? And a duck
Yeah.
intensity, the duck on top of the water is calm, but underneath his little feet are kicking like hell. So the intensity for me is internal, and I'm watching, and if I see opponents start to feed off that intensity, I try and bring it back. We kind of go to that gentle bunny intensity, like, it's okay, little bunny, it's all right, and try and bring it
Yes.
down. And then the tempo changes, and you're in control of that tempo, that intensity, and hopefully you can out accelerate them on that mental aspect. So for me, intensity is a very important part of that whole core of the fight, and it's right in there with that timeline and measure.
And what Octo talks about here is crucial. The fact that your mental energy will express itself through your body energy. Therefore, it can be read from an opponent by your body movements, even though you may think they're very subtle. And they are subtle, but you can pick up on them.
Right. And it is one of those things that when you stare into the ocularium of your opponent's helmet, you have no idea what their intensity is. Right?
All right,
if
just
they're
so we can
manifesting it in a physical manner, that's one thing. But if they're standing there, like Octamasades said, it's like, I've got it internalized, but I'm not broadcasting it. I'm not giving my opponent a tell. Now it comes down to, okay, you on your side, you know what yours is, but you have to be mindful. You, in a way, can have no idea of the intensity of your opponent.
So let's cover focus and state of mind
Right.
together, just to, because we got about we're probably run a little bit over, but so we only got about 10 minutes.
Well, and they are dramatically connected.
Yes.
So go ahead, Brannos.
So, here's the piece, on my end, it's, for me, focus and mind state are something that come easier to me over the long years I've done this. This is the one piece that is the thing you have to train your students and your squires and people that want to be good in small bits, because it's difficult, because they're struggling with everything else.
Yes.
And you have to introduce that focus to them, because it's very easy to become over focused on one thing. It's like, okay, I got to be focused. I got to be focused on winning, or I got to be focused on this one shot. So, the key there is to introduce the focus in a way that it's like, okay, I want you to go out there and I want you to read this fight and I want you to be in it. And that way they don't get that single line of focus, and they don't have the mindset of, I have to win. They have that mindset of, I'm going to execute everything I know how to do. And then when that breaks down, they can step back. And this is the hardest part. They can step back and step right back in with a clear slate. This is a new fight, even if it's the same opponent, even if that hold was never called. That ability to get that focus and mindset are the things that are some of the hardest things to work on. And this is the one thing that I mentioned when I travel a lot, is when people come down levels and train and train and train, the ability to snap in focus and state of mind become harder and harder. You have to communicate with your opponent. I tell everyone where I go, it's like, you tell them when we are training right now. So let's do stuff. Let's work through stuff. I'm going to work maybe through my feet harder. They don't even know that's just what I'm going to do. I'm not going to throw as many shots. I'm going to have them working on something. I'll give them some opportunities. And then at the end, I'll be like, 3 crown fights. And I'll turn it on. I don't care if they're Sean, and I don't care if I just put the guy in armor 3 weeks ago. Okay. The guy I put in armor 3 weeks ago is going to receive a nice shot, maybe in the same place 3 times. Right? Sean's going to get the fight he expects from me. Because what I am practicing is focus and mindset. Because I have to practice too. And that guy, the guy that's there, for his 3rd week, that's what he wants. The day he blocks that one shot I just hit him with is the day he's like, woohoo! He just gave me a crown fight and I blocked it.
Right.
And you're being truthful with him. He wants to see the truth too, but you have to let him know, here's my crown fights. Here's our training.
You described this perfectly. And I think almost every fighter has had this experience where they get into a fight, they're well matched, things aren't going the way that they think, and they have trouble letting go. To me, this comes back to let go of the garbage during your day as you put your gear on to go to practice. Get in the habit of learning to let the garbage go, let the baggage, set it down, and just go from new right then and there. And the more you practice that at practice, the more it will come out in the high pressure situation that you need it to.
Yes, absolutely.
As we get better at what we do, especially crown competitors, there's so much of what we do where our experiences and our just become automatic in tournament, where we don't have to we don't have to like deliberately elicit these sort of things. But the first crown that I won, I was in the finals with a very good friend of mine, and there was a moment at which I realized that Basil took control of the fight. And it was a moment of clarity unlike any other I think I've had in Crown before or since, because it was like, again, everything is just kind of settled in who I am as a competitor now. But this was that moment of clarity where I was like, this guy took control of the fight. And if I don't do something about that, this fight's going to be over. And that focus that Brannos was just talking about, like, that happens in the middle of a fight.
Yes.
And being able to pull that back and make that realization that it's like, I'm in trouble here and I need to do something about it. And I did. I was able to like, just recognizing that that's what happened, I was able to take that control back and ended up winning my first crown off of that. But that's more what that focus is. And it happens in that kind of moment. It's not, it's not this, I mean, it is, microseconds that you need to change that focus and get that back to be able to get back to the fight that you know how to execute.
Absolutely.
So should we move on to the last part here?
Yeah, let's go ahead and first I want to make sure everybody knows we apologize for running a little bit over, but I think this is important. And I hope you all think it's important as well, and that the episode was good. We have a lot of viewers on tonight, and I know I personally enjoyed this episode a lot so far. We got one last group of things, and Sean's going to cover those, and we'll try to wrap this up in about 10 minutes. And let us know how you like this episode when we're done. So,
yes,
Sean,
please.
Definitely. Yeah, that's something else we want to mention. If you're out there and if you're enjoying watching it, just go ahead and do a Facebook react on the live feed there. Just like or thumbs up or whatever you have. That kind of gives us an idea about how many people are actually watching throughout the thing. So definitely feel free to do that. We're not big on the like and subscribe sort of stuff, but that kind of helps us gauge your interest. So the last part we're going to cover is 5 mental exercises and tools. And these include goal setting, self-talk, breathing, imagery, and routines. And when we talk about goal setting, one of the things about setting a goal is that a goal has to be ambitious and attainable. We've run into, all of us have run into that guy that shows up at their first practice. They're like, oh, well, I see what you're doing here. I'm going to be knighted in 2 years. I'm going to win crown in 3 years. And, and while people have done that, it's typically not the people that show up and say that that's what they're going to do. They have to be achievable, and they have to be attainable, and they have to be ambitious. And one of the things about goal setting is that, if a goal that is not written down is a wish. That's something you hope is going to happen. But setting that goal and writing it down and having it in your visible conscience every day, having it written down, or, I'd read a post a long time ago about a guy who was getting divorced. And so he decided to change his password at work to something that was kind of related to recovering off of that. And so we all got way too many passwords we have to do. And if you create a password that is related to one of your goals, you are constantly typing that in. Every day you sit down at a computer and you say walk 3 miles or whatever it's going to be. It's some sort of connection to your goal. And so anybody else got any thoughts on goal setting?
My big thing with goals is I'm all about instant gratification. So I like to have ranges of goals. So I have a short-term goal. Like it might be ride your bike to work tomorrow. Sweet. I'm going to get up. I'm going to set my habits. So all my stuff, I have no excuses now because I've set all my routine or my habits in place. I ride my bike. I get to work. I got endorphins. I've already achieved a goal before 7 a.m. in the morning. Sweet. I won. Then I might have a midterm goal that's a little more ambitious, like you were saying. That might be something that's a month, 2 months, 6 months out. And then I might have a long-term goal, like making sure I practice every day so I can go to Sean's retreat next year, all that kind of stuff. So, so I think it's really important not just have this one ambitious goal. I'm going to go to Crown and I'm going to make it to round 5. That's a great goal, but you don't control everything in that goal. But I can control getting my butt out of bed and going to practice, or riding my bike to work, or doing my squats or my workouts that I've written down. So I like a range of goals, a short, midterm, and long term, and then set up routines and habits that give you a roadmap so you can actually achieve it.
Yeah, and one thing about goals, they should be immediately followed by a plan.
Yes. Not
just, as you guys have mentioned, next Crown, I'm going to get to the 5th rounder. I'm going to be a knight in 2. No. That's some of those are realistic. Some of them are unrealistic, but setting a goal and then backing it up with a plan. There you go.
Yep. Milestones are another way to view goals. If the term goals get a little too stuck in your head of, all right, what's too much, what's too little, just view them as there will be a sequence of goals that will get ever more closer to the direction that you want to head. Even if you don't have a firm direction, like maybe you don't want to win crown, you know?
Yeah.
But you just want to be a really good fighter. Well, that's kind of vague. But if you say, I want to, you know, be able to win my first tournament of at least 20 people in it, or I want to, you know, be able to beat a knight in a tournament, or some of these may seem, I guess maybe a little odd, but they're at least something tangible you can put down as like, I want to achieve this. You have that in your mind of there's your will and your intention.
Yeah. Baroness Sive, Brannos Esquire, who was on with us a couple of weeks ago, the phrase that she used for this was discrete, achievable tasks.
Nice.
You know, breaking things down into, you know, things that you can do. And in the Navy SEALs refer to these as increments or evolutions.
Right.
And sometimes that increment is these 10 push-ups you're doing, you know, while you're getting sugar cookied on the beach. I'm going to do these 10 push-ups, and that's it. That's all I'm going to achieve right now. And those are some of those discrete achievable tasks. And yeah, being able to break out those long-term goals into the plan and the immediate steps. So next one is self-talk. This is one of those other things that I was reading about that Navy SEALs talk about a lot, and they train a lot on self-talk. Self-talk can be very powerful, and it can be very dangerous. Depends on what you want to tell yourself. You know, there's a saying out there that you know, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. You are correct. And you know, some of the self-talk, it can be easy to pump yourself up. I mean, there's self-talk, and then there's believing your own press, right? So we want to kind of manage the fine line between the two. But you know, if you are going to do the negative self-talk and you're going to say, you know, I can never beat Octa because he's left-handed, or I can never beat Brannos because he's, you know, because he's Brannos, and you know, if you tell yourself that you can't do those things, you're absolutely right. If you tell yourself you can do those things, that may or may not bear out, but at least you have a shot, right?
What you think about, you bring about.
Right.
I can't agree more. I can't agree more. And it's funny because, you know, it's funny you're going in because the next part of this is another Navy SEAL technique that they use quite a bit. And I'll let you bring that one up. But, you know, it's that self-talk is believing and helping you believe yourself. And this is actually probably the hardest piece to give to somebody else. And it takes the most insight to what that person's like to be able to get them there. And that's not done just by a trainer. That is done by somebody very personal that knows that individual.
Yep.
So why don't you go on to the breathing one?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people don't understand this one well, but boy, is it fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, breathing, right? That's the Chinese secret to long life. Keep breathing.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly.
You know, people, you know, we get into, and again, this goes back to that emotional expenditure we were talking about earlier, where when you decide that you're going to engage the fight, you know, a lot of times what I see when somebody has to gird up their loins and make that decision, there is this physical manifestation of them making that decision. Yes. And it involves big, deep breath. Let's hold on to that breath for 8 or 10 shots.
Yeah.
At least,
at least, you know, and I'm going to get in and people have no idea that they're doing it. Tristan, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but this is part of why in most Eastern discipline martial arts, there's that kiop, that little noise that people make when they're striking is intended to be a release of breath as you're striking.
And tension.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
no, I was gonna say it's just one of those things that we do in other martial arts to make that part of the strike so that you don't have to think about the breathing part, and you just
do it.
You just do it.
Well, and you also release tension in your body. That allows all of that power to flow out of you.
Right.
And the more you release tension, allows more air to come into your lungs because your lungs aren't compressed.
Right.
But even more on the on breathing side, if you look up box breathing, really amazing. All right. I mean, it says there are so many. Box breathing comes out of the SEALs again. And it's something that's done there a lot. They do a ton of different breathing exercises. Obviously, it's very important for them. But military do this a lot to provide clear focus.
Yep.
And so that when you're in the middle of a firefight, you're not emotionally charged. Your emotion is to protect the guy next to you, kill the thing in front of you as fast as you can, and keep moving.
Yep.
While you're breathing and relaxed and moving constantly.
Right.
And it is absolutely doable, but very hard, because how many people out there practice breathing, period?
Right.
Funny part is you can find box breathing right inside yoga, right? You can find box breathing in all kinds of stuff. I will post up an article on box breathing after we're done. I posted it about a year or two ago. I will post it on the page so you guys can read it. Really, really cool. You know, those clarity times when you're in a melee and you're just killing everything, and your mind is free and just beautifully focused, and there is just like one hit, bang, 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 bang. There you are.
The void.
Brannos, I just posted in the live stream on Facebook page for 4 techniques Navy SEALs and Olympians use for, and it's all this. It's
Yeah.
self-talk. It's goal setting, self-talk, imagery, all that. So that's more good information for people to go look up. And I'll post that in the Coach's Corner page later tonight too.
Right.
Awesome.
As to breathing is absolutely part of the flow. It's essential to the flow. So
yeah, we don't talk about it enough. I mean, we really don't. All right, let's wrap up the last two and wrap up the episode.
All right. So the last two are imagery and routines. And these are also kind of go hand in hand. So we're talking about imagery. We're talking about visualization. It's there's been plenty of studies done on the difference between actually shooting free throws versus imagining yourself shooting free throws in basketball, and the people that the students that sat and imagined themselves going through the process did just as well as the people who were actually shooting them. And along with that same basketball reference, especially free throws. We were talking about this last night after the Ask the Knights, routine, right? And that's a big part of what we do, is especially at a competitive level, is we want to make sure that everything we do is the same as much as possible. And when you think about professional basketball players shooting free throws, and you got the people behind the basket that are, waving their batons and screaming and banners and all this shit that's going on behind them, professional free throw shooters don't see any of that. That stuff doesn't exist to them at all. And that's part of their routine. And when you look at the guys who are really good, like a high percentage free throw shooters, you will notice that every time they go to the line, their free throw shooting is exactly the same every single time. And it's that process, it's that routine that, and nobody hits them 100%, but the process of making everything routine and doing it exactly the same way thousands and thousands of times, that's called muscle memory.
I'd even say with
sorry, go ahead, Tristan.
To jump to visualization, to describe that, it's not just daydreaming, it's actually bringing a routine to your mental exercise of visualizing yourself executing perfectly.
Yes.
And the ability to do like rewind and fast forward, and I mean all of that stuff, it's more elaborate than just replaying one scene over and over and over again. And when you practice this, you can get to the point where you can do this with fights that you've had, that you've recorded in your head. You can go back and rewind and go, well, how could I have done this better? And that visualization process is something that is just invaluable. And it will be a tool that if you're invested in your fighting, you'll develop this just out of interest. You'll take downtime where you're riding a bus to work, or you're sitting around doing nothing, and you're just like, okay, how could I have done this better? Or you watch a fight that you'd seen two other people do, and you kind of recorded it and go, what did they do wrong? What did they do right? If I had to face them, how would I do it? And you can use that visualization tool. It's a very robust tool, but it just takes a little bit of practice to kind of get used to it.
Right. It's one of those things when you're at practice, you might not have a video camera, so you can't run in the house and you can't look at it, but you can stand there and go, what happened? Why did it happen? Who did it happen against? What do I do now? And sometimes the answer is immediate. Sometimes it is not, right? So you have to be very aware that imagery is a very good tool. Sometimes it's not immediate, but don't give up on it.
And it's important to understand yourself and understand your tools, and having
Yes.
those routines and that foundation of technique chunked into your head so you can plug, hey, what if I would have said during this shot, but if I pull that chunk out and I plug in a flat snap, oh, that wouldn't have worked. Oh, I had to put a step in there. Could I have stepped into that?
Mhm.
You're visualizing, you're plugging in these chunks of learning that you've honed
Yes.
through hours and hours of routine and repetition.
Right. We're back to the what if I do this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Brannos, would you like to wrap us up?
Yeah, the first I want to thank everybody for being patient and letting us run over for 15 minutes. I'm hoping to get a little bit more talk out there. We'll post this up so everybody can see it. Point your friends over. We'll be up on SCA Coach's Corner. I want to thank everybody. There's been some great conversation out there this week, and it seems like more and more people are getting involved. And you know, it takes everybody to make this community. It takes all of us to make the society better, make fighting better. It takes all of us. You know, every piece you give only makes yourself better in the long run as well. And that's why we're all here doing this. You know, and I can't thank people enough for doing that. And I look forward to hearing and seeing more people online and seeing more people in person when we're back up and going. We'll post up a couple more articles. Articles are going up all the time on different things. And there's lots more content coming along the way. We have a bunch of new drill content coming up and things like that. So looking forward to, you know, a lot of good stuff in the next few months. So talking about that, what do we have next month or next week?
Interview with Duke Michael.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Pretty excited about that one.
I remember that guy.
Yeah, some dude.
Yeah.
So yeah, Duke Michael was one of my squires. He came to our sport with a fully accomplished martial arts background to begin with. He was able to empty his cup in a way that I have never seen anybody else do, honestly. And he allowed me to teach him SCA combat. And then he started applying the stuff that he knew from martial arts. And that's when he became just a beast. He has one of the most brilliant minds for the vision of the fight, and super excited to talk to him and share some of that stuff. So we're really excited about that. So otherwise, as Brannos said, thank you to everybody for making this the SCA Coaches Corner becoming more and more community all the time. We really appreciate that. Thanks for the questions and the comments in the live feed there. We'll be posting some stuff up there. So thanks again to the other coaches, Sagan, Octa, Tristan. Thanks as always.
Have a good night, everybody.
Hey,
Thank you.
Shout out
have
to
a good one.
Vesper for still setting all of this up and getting us going too.
There we go.
Like I said, even though Vesper wasn't
better.
here, you can see this that it always works better with her here. So we look forward to having her back next week. So
100%.
right on. All right, thanks everybody. Everybody have a good night.
Yeah,
Have a good
good
evening.
night.
Night.